an opportunity for you to learn about the city's budgeting process and start next year's budget process. So we're going to get started in just a minute here. I'm just going to give folks a couple more minutes to get settled in and to join our session. All right, welcome if you're just joining us. Seeing some new people. We'll be putting some information in the chat about tonight's session. Some more information will be coming up shortly. All right, looks like we've got a few more people joining us. Welcome. And if you're just joining us, you can check out the chat. There's some information about tonight's session there in the chat. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes. Welcome, everybody. If you're just joining, if you're just popping on, we're going to get started here in a couple of minutes. Welcome, panelists, for joining us. Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight. All right. Well, welcome, everybody. I think we've got most people here, and perhaps others will continue to join us as tonight's session goes on. But we'll go ahead and get rolling. My name is Carly Adams. I'm tonight's moderator. I'm going to just kick us off here and then pass the conversation, pass the virtual mic on. So welcome to tonight's community budget briefing. This is a chance for you to learn more about the city's budgeting process and next year's budget development. Just a few logistical reminders. Tonight's webinar is being recorded and it will be available for viewing on the city's website. You can see those instructions there in the chat. And interpretation is available, and you can see down at the bottom there is a little globe. You can select the language if you'd like to use the interpretation feature. And also, since this is a multilingual space, we just want to remind everybody to speak slowly and clearly. And for tonight, only the panelists and participants with a direct role are going to be sharing, and the rest of the participants are going to be on mute with the cameras and titles off. So if you'd like to see a little bit of the agenda, you can refer to the chat. And if you have a question, tonight we'll be using the webinar feature, so you can ask your question with the Q&A down at the bottom. There's a bar. You can find the Q&A feature and you can type your question in there. If you are calling in, you can press *9 and that will allow you to raise your hand to be able to ask a question if you're calling. With that, and then again, after tonight, we'll try to answer as many questions as possible for tonight's session live, and if we can't get to all the questions, then those will be documented and be answered later. We'll put in the chat a place to find those answers. And also there will be an online feedback form in the chat as well if you have a question for after tonight's session. So with that, I'm going to thank you all for joining us, and I am going to pass this off to Mayor Beatty for the opening remarks for tonight's session.
Thank you, Carly, for being our moderator tonight. I know choosing someone from our conflict mediation department to do this work probably feels like just another day in the office for you, but having sharp mediation and moderation for tonight's is aces. So thank you for taking time away from your family on an evening and joining us. I'm joining you guys with my 17-day-old daughter, Kyra, who this morning made a debut testifying in the Senate. So just a reminder that your council is always working hard for you. I'm joined tonight with our subcommittee members, Councillor Hassan, who is one of our longest serving city councilors now, and Councillor Duggar, who served on the budget committee prior to him. The rest of the councilors are here, but the way that we decided to tackle the budget, knowing that we were coming into a hard year, was create a subcommittee of a couple individuals on council that could really dig into the meat and potatoes of our budget and truly understand. When we shifted our form of government, we brought on a professional city manager that helped us understand that the budget crisis we're in is not something that developed overnight, and rather it was something that's kind of been building the last couple of years, and she's going to go into those details. So when we formed the subcommittee, forming and bringing on subcommittee members that had intense knowledge of the budget already in place was a desirable place to start. And I'll tell you, even though the three of us started with the most information, it was still an overwhelming process for us to spend time together, to understand, to try to make recommendations to our fellow counselors and to our community that we know is not going to be what everyone wants us to be. This is my 9th budget as an elected official, and this is the hardest one I've had to deal with. We have a lot of things in front of us tonight to discuss about how we're going to manage our city going forward. What's the most important things for us to fund right now? And it's not doom and gloom, though. I want you to know as a community that your elected officials took this role seriously. We brought on professional consultants to help us understand where we're at and how to move forward. But what I think this gives us is a great opportunity to refine relationships. We are a city full of special districts. We have one of the best school districts in the state. We have a world-class park district, a world-class fire district, and a world-class water district. And what I think we get to do this year is really go back to basics. What is the city designed to do? What could we do in partnerships with everyone else to not have duplication in services? And how do we bring all of our elected officials across all of our special districts in line together to provide the best services for our community? So this is not what I think any elected official, particularly as a mayor, that I want to sit in front of our community and talk about hard times ahead. Instead, I want us to look at this as an opportunity to move forward, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There's some tough choices ahead of our council in this next year. And as a community, we want to hear from you. So tonight's our first kind of opening conversation. We're hosting another one in a week in person, and we want to hear from the community, but we understand that you elected us to make hard decisions, and that's what we're going to do together. So with that, I'll hand it back to the moderator. Thank you for spending time with us this evening.
Thank you so much, Mayor Beatty, and congratulations. It's good to see you. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to our city manager, Jenny Hariyama, to be able to share tonight's presentation.
Great, thank you, Carly. My name is Jenny Hariyama. I'm the city manager of Beaverton, and the mayor set the table really nicely of what we're going to talk to you about this evening, particularly giving you a little bit of Budget 101, and then getting into the heart of the matter of talking about some of our fiscal challenges, and then really how you can get involved and learn more. So if we can have the slide deck up, I'd like to run through about 10 slides with you. Thank you. And if we can move to the next slide after you get that into the presentation mode. We just need to get it into slideshow, and I think we're off to the races. There we go. All right. Okay, let's move to the next slide and get started. Okay, so city budgets are typically organized by fund. And as you can see, the city has many different funds, all with resources that can be used for very specific things, except for one. And that's the general fund. The general fund is what I typically will refer to as the city's kind of main checkbook that pays for the bulk of core services in the city. And it's the one that has the most discretionary revenue, which means that there's no restrictions and you can pretty much use it for just about anything. And I'll tell you what those anythings are in a couple of slides. This is where your property tax goes and is spent. And in addition to other discretionary revenue that comes in, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, I wanted to talk to you about some of these other funds really briefly. So your special revenue funds are funds that might be unfamiliar to you. So think about the library fund. This is where we have county funds that come in. We have a property tax levy that supports library services. The city also helps to supplant some of our library services as well. And those funds can only be spent on library services. They can't be spent on police, for instance. We also have a building fund. And a building fund is responsible for issuing building, plumbing, heating, cooling, things of that nature, electrical permits. And the building division is responsible for actually enforcing state of Oregon building codes. And these codes are laws that regulate how things can be constructed. And then maybe another one that might be familiar to you is the street fund. There's a gas tax that you pay when you fill up your gas tank, and that goes to the city coffers so that we can help improve streets, roads, curbs, gutters, things of that nature. And they only can be spent on street maintenance. We have a utility fund that's for things like water, stormwater, sewer, that's revenue that's used for utility related expenses. And it can be for construction and things of that nature. Capital Projects Fund is exactly as it sounds. These funds come from multiple sources and they help fund large capital construction projects. And then last, we've got a debt service fund. So think of this as like a credit card, but the city actually has very little debt. We do have some significant bond issuances. A really good example of one that might be familiar to you is the Public Safety Center. And those payments come out of this fund. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this, oops, got to go back one. All right. So general fund revenue, we have about a $97 million general fund revenue budget. And as you can see, about 42% of that is supported by property tax. And the remainder of the 58% comes from a variety of different sources. And just to kind of go back on property tax is based on the assessed valuation of residential and commercial properties, so existing and new properties, which are determined by established city levy rate and state law. And so the remaining 58% is a variety of sources. Things that we rely on are things that are called right-of-way fees. These are utility-based fees. Think about cable, water, natural gas that use our right-of-way. So if they're going to be able to use like our streets, for instance, to hold and protect their assets, they need to pay a fee for that. So we collect those type of revenues. Intergovernmental revenues, we have many agreements with some of our neighboring jurisdictions that bring in revenue. We also get many grants that help pay for a number of services and construction projects as well. Permits and fees, so think of city fees. Those are things if you're going to want to build or construct something and you need to go through a land use process, or you need to purchase your annual business license. Those are city fees. And so we collect fees for service. And the driver of those fees are typically the cost of the fee and then the volume and activity. And it's really important as I'm talking about fees that many of our fees are what are called economically sensitive. So as your economy changes, whether it goes up or down, the amount of revenue that you get also corresponds with that. Fines and forfeitures is another fee source. So think about court citations. Interest income, albeit very small, is another source of revenue. And then there are things that are called interfund transfers. And those are from other funds for support and oversight for services that the general fund provides to other funds, like maybe water or library or streets, things of that nature. Or funds that are coming in. Think about the American Rescue Plan Act, and you'll hear me use the acronym ARPA. Those are federal pandemic funds that have come into the city, and we've been able to disperse those out to the community. And then last, there's a little item on here that's called beginning working capital. That just means it's what you have left over after you've balanced everything in your beginning fund balance. So let's go to the next slide. This is the one with the dollar bill, and this is really, really important. And so as you'll see, as I mentioned, we only receive 42% of property tax that supports the general fund. And the reason why is for every dollar that you spend in property tax, we receive 21 cents. That's 21 cents for police, courts, library, economic development, planning and development, you name it. All of that, just 21 cents. So we really try to stretch that. But we also share that with a lot of other agencies. So the next time you look at your property tax bill, see that there's other agencies that actually share in this dollar bill. So I want to kind of go over very briefly with what those other agencies are. So the next one is called BURA, and that's 2 cents, and that's for the Beaverton Urban Renewal Agency. And what this does is this invests property tax increment. And that means that it's the difference between the growth in property tax and the existing taxes that are collected. And that's actually invested in downtown Beaverton, central Beaverton. It is limited to that area. And so where you see a lot of the good work, a lot of the street improvements and whatnot, it's all happening with all of the commercial and restaurant businesses that are building up down there. The county gets 14 cents. So human services, social services tends to be that focus area. The lion's share of this actually is with the school district at about 38%. And then you have fire with 10% and 10 cents. You have parks, which is the Tualatin Hills Park and Rec. They receive 8 cents. And then Metro, which is basically provides regional governance around land use, parks and trails, zoo, convention center, recycling and solid waste, they're at 3 cents. And then there's a whole bunch of other smaller taxes. And I think the big picture here is to let you know that we share this with a lot of other agencies in order to provide services to you. The city is not a full service city. We have a fire district, as you can see, Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue. We don't provide park and rec services. We have a great park district, Tualatin Hills Park and Rec. So a lot of these services are shared and they're not completely provided by the city. And so that's why we only get a smaller portion of your property tax dollar. And if you hit the anime, you'll just see that 21 cents show you there, right there before you go to the next slide. And this slide will talk to you a little bit about expenses. All right, so with that $97 million in revenue, we have $97 million in expenses. And so the bulk of those expenses are through your police department at about $40 million. We receive nearly 80,000 calls per year for calls for service that we report to. So it's a significant chunk. And when you have the police department, there's lots of other tools, equipment, technology that comes with it. And also it takes people to provide this type of service. So that's why the bulk of that is so expensive. We also have development and planning activities. So kind of give you a sense of what that means. Think about planning for current and new development. Cooper Mountain is a great example of that. Zoning, where do things need to go in the city? That department helps look at land use applications and determines where does commercial properties need to be? Where do new residential need to be? Site development. So when you have tree removal or sidewalk repair or utility connections, when you need to cut into curb, gutter, sidewalk, site development helps pay for those things. City services and engagement is another really important service that we provide. That is all of our culturally inclusion activities, our homelessness. We have communications. And one thing around communications and neighborhood support is what's called our NACs. We have 11 neighborhood association committees. So that takes a lot of folks to support that. We really want to make sure the community is involved. So think about NAC Central Beaverton, Greenway, Sexton Mountain, West Slope. Those are just a few of the 11 that we support. We also have 17 boards and commissions that we support as well through those expenses. Plus we host a number of city events. We have landscaping services, engineering. We have a municipal court that we run, and we're very unique in that way. And then finally, we've got administrative services, which includes your city manager, your city attorney, human resources, finance, your city recorder, which hosts all of the legislative activity and history and makes sure to manage all of that. And then you have your council budget. And then the last I would point out is that there's this little thing that's called the general contingency. And that is our rainy day fund. When things that are unexpected that comes up, we use this very sparingly, but it's important that we have that and we show that into our expenditure pie. And then as I mentioned, it's not reflected here, but we do provide support for the library. And just to give you an order of magnitude, we help supplant the library's budget by about $4.4 million. And that still is not enough money to make up for the needs that we have for the community. And you might be asking, well, these are really big numbers. What's the driver of cost? Why do numbers go, up and down in a budget? Well, a lot of that's based on the desired level of service. I'll use the police as an example. When you make that call and you need the police to come, you want to make sure that they come in a really quick and reasonable amount of time. So we want to make sure that we are providing resources that keep that level of service where it needs to be. The cost of labor has increased tremendously through inflation. So we've seen it in our salaries, our materials, our supplies. The supply chain issue was very impactful to not only Beaverton, all the surrounding areas. So the amount of time that it took to get things, or the cost of getting things because it was delayed, was also a significant impact as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that feeds into our budget challenges and how we got here. Next slide. So this is a really important chart. So when we start to project out all of our general fund revenues and expenditures over the next 5 years, it looks like we have a lot of work to do. So I want to orient you to the top part of the slide. So the top green horizontal line reflects revenues, and the blue line shows expenses. And as you can see, if you look based on actuals under year end 2022, we had a deficit. And if you look at where the spike is, if we could animate the slide, you'll see a circle pop up. Or maybe not. There we go. And so in that is when we had pandemic relief come in. So we had a number of funding come in from the federal, that's that ARPA terminology that I shared earlier. So we had federal funds come in, and then those funds also went out, and they went out to the community, and they went out to small businesses. And that deficit continued into the next year, which is fiscal year ending 2023. And fortunately, we had remaining ARPA funds, and we are able to close that gap using those one-time funds. And that's really important for you to hold on to, one time, it's not ongoing revenue, to avoid having to draw down on our rainy day fund or reserve. And so when you look at those dotted lines, and if we can animate the slide again so you know where I'm talking about, if you look at those dotted lines, they're starting to split apart, where your expenditures are trending and getting that space is getting wider and wider, and your revenues are on the bottom. That's not a good thing. And that shows that $10 million shortfall that we're actually facing in next year's fiscal budget. And this is going to require things that are more permanent in nature. We're not going to be able to infuse one time to get ourselves, unfortunately, out of this. And we can't draw down on our reserves. And I'll tell you why. If you just look at those bottom lines, it probably is self-explanatory. That purple line is the line that reflects what our target reserve is, which is about 11% of expenditures. And the black line is what would happen if we continue to rely on reserves and not identify structural permanent changes to change this course. And so we'll talk a little bit about what that means for you. But next slide, you'll want to know how we got here. So let's talk a little bit about that. All right, so for several years, going back from 2017, 18, and 19, if we can animate the slide, we'll show you another little circle. And so pre-pandemic, that expense line, which is the light blue line, is on top of the green line. And you can tell that it's really hard, but we were running a small deficit back then. And that means that our revenues and expenditures were not quite in alignment. And then what happens is that eventually catches up with us, and we hit into the pandemic. And if we can animate the slide, you can see what's going on with those lines, again, starting to spread apart. And that's not a good sign. So while cities were laying off, though, during this time, Beaverton was maintaining services. We pushed out city funding to small businesses. We wanted to keep that local economy going. We did this in advance of federal funding coming in, but we were also impacted by inflation. So wages, benefits were increasing significantly, coupled with the materials and supplies that I was talking about a little bit ago. So next slide. So you might be asking what we're doing. And so the mayor talked a little bit about this, that we've pulled together a fiscal sustainability subcommittee of the council to really provide that policy guidance. And then we've got some fiscal experts that are helping us develop a long-term financial plan so that we can start making sure that we're building our reserves, of reducing our expenditures, and looking at different ways of how we can shore up some revenue enhancements. And we're all doing this through a lens of prioritizing essential services and really identifying what are core, what are important, and what are those extra things that maybe we need to pull back on. Next slide. So this is probably the most important part of the conversation this evening. So what does this mean for you? We're in the process of finalizing the proposed budget for next year, and we do anticipate that services are going to be impacted. So things to maybe expect. And this is still a work in progress, so I don't have a level of detail, but we can expect that some of our programming is going to be impacted. Our hours may be reduced. We might have slower response times. And we're going to need to explore a lot of different type of expenditure reductions in order to make those lines come together. The other thing that is important for you to understand is we're also going to have to look at our revenue side of the house as well. And this would include looking at our property tax. And I want to share a few things with you. The Beaverton property tax actually has only changed by 8 cents within the past decade. And so remember that dollar bill slide I showed you, we're only currently getting 21 cents for every dollar. And we're trying to work really hard to stretch that, but it's just quite not enough. And so the city has a voter approved property tax maximum rate of $4.61 per assessed thousand. And currently it's at $4.22, which means there's about 39 cents left to go before we can hit the cap. And then we cannot make any changes unless you as the voter decide to. And so, well, what does that mean? How does that translate for you? That would be on average an impact to a family of about $10 a month, or it would be $120 a year. And that does sound pretty significant. We realize that you have put your fair share in as property owners. And so, which is why we are looking at other opportunities to do a comprehensive fee study and look at where we can adjust city fees, where visitors are using our amenities. We have businesses, larger businesses that perhaps need to weigh in more, as well as development. And so our city fee opportunity, they are pretty much at pre-inflation rates. We haven't done any citywide updates in the last 5 to 10 years. So we have a little bit of work to do, and we plan on using this next year on looking at our cost recovery rate and seeing where fees need to be increased or reduced or eliminated, or maybe there are new fees that we need to introduce. So ultimately, all through that lens, our goal is going to be to minimize impacts, of course, on you, but while maintaining your existing level of service. And we also are doing this probably through the most efficient lens that we can, and looking at how we can use things like technology so that we can use less people, but use more tools in order to reduce costs. So if we move to the next slide, which is probably one of the second most important slides, is how can you learn more? We have a number of workshops and budget meetings that are coming up. I really encourage you, if you want to hear this again, we have another meeting scheduled for the 24th of April at 6 o'clock in person in the chambers. The council will be talking about budget balancing strategies, not only for the short, but for the long term. That will be on April 25th at 6 o'clock in the chambers. Budget committee hearings. We have 2 of them scheduled, May 9th and 23rd, and then a public hearing on June 6th. And we also have a website that you can go to and check out the beavertonoregon.gov/budget link. We want to hear your ideas, your questions. We're happy to get back to you if you give us your contact information and share more about what's going on. Maybe you've got some really good insight on how we can be more efficient in service delivery. So I am going to pause, but I want to let you know that I also have my finance director here with me, Debbie Lautner, and she's joining me this evening. She's going to help me answer questions that you might have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carly, because I believe folks have been gathering questions during this presentation.
Thank you, Jenny.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone. And it does look like we have a couple of questions that have come in. So I'm going to go ahead and read that. The first question is there a contingency requirement for the general fund, such as the city is required to maintain a 10% contingency or other amount?
Yes, there is. And I'll let Debbie talk about the details of what our contingency is.
So for the general fund, the council passed a fund balancing contingency policy in December of 2018. That the council's policy is for budget development. The general fund would have a target of 11% of proposed expenditures as the budget development fund balance contingency target.
All right, just checking to see if there was anything else that we needed to add to that. Okay, we have one more question here. If the city increases the property tax, would that only impact the portion that the city receives, or would it increase across the dollar to other agencies too? I think that's referring back to that slide.
Not that I'm aware of, Debbie. Am I missing something? I believe that would go straight for the city. I don't know if it impacts other agencies.
That I would have to defer to Susan, who is my assistant finance director that knows a lot more about Oregon property taxes than I do. I believe you're correct, Jenny, but you know, Susan can correct us if we're incorrect.
Yes, good evening. My name is Susan Cole. I'm the assistant director. It would also impact our urban renewal district, but it would not spread over the other districts.
Thank you, Susan.
Those are the two that are in the Q&A so far. So I just want to invite anybody that's listening in, if there's a question on your mind, if you want to select that Q&A button there at the bottom, and go ahead and type your question now. And give folks a second to do that. We have another question that's come in here. Can you share examples of some revenue strategies that are being considered?
Yes, so actually as a part of the strategies conversation, which will be on the 25th of this month, we'll be talking about exactly that. So ones that we know that are more than likely coming through for the next fiscal year will be fee adjustments, obviously examining those and where we need to shore up and keep up with inflation. The other, of course, will be the property tax conversation. But the council will also talk about future opportunities of whether there may be an option levy to help operations for a certain particular service. We also have a number of conversations around our street fund to make sure that we're keeping our what's called our pavement condition index maintained at a high level, albeit that's not general fund. That is something that's really important because you do want to make sure your streets are maintained over the long haul. So there'll be a number of strategies that the council will explore. Those won't be all of them. There'll be other things that will come up for conversation. I think it's important. This one is a great question, and it's really important that our community understands that this is a really fluid process, and that we're very nimble and we're able to pivot when we need to. And so we're not locked into one particular approach or strategy. And so I would encourage you to tune in on April 25th and listen to some of those conversations.
Thanks, Jenny. While we're waiting for just more questions as they're coming in, just making sure there wasn't anything else to add to that. Okay. And as we're waiting, the attendees should be able to see the questions that have come in by clicking the Q&A if you want to read along as we're answering these questions. All right, I have another question here. How much does the city of Beaverton spend each year to maintain a transportation system based on private car ownership, prioritizing people over cars by promoting micro-mobility and public transit is a net benefit for society?
Well, that's a real great question. I'm going to have to phone a friend here with my finance director, and it's also transportation related dollars and not necessarily general fund. So Debbie, I don't know if we need to bring Susan into this conversation as well.
Probably, because our transportation dollars are across many different funds. I'm not sure that we could actually answer this right now because, again, like we have transportation development tax, we have the street fund. You know, there are a variety of funds that contribute to the transportation system. And so we might have to do a little bit of work to pull that out and put it into $1 figure.
Yes, good evening. I can provide some information that we do raise approximately $8 million in gas tax, and that does go straight to the transportation network. And as Debbie mentioned, that's just one piece of the amount that the city invests in transportation. So yes, we will have to gather that information.
I think it's important on that question as well to know that most of the transportation work we do in partnership with the county, with Metro, with TriMet and ODOT, and many of the roads that are within the city of Beaverton are actually not our jurisdiction, they're jurisdiction of others. So I think it is a very complex question because so much of what we do is interconnected, and that there's tax raised regionally as well that go into transportation. So it's kind of a complex question for us to answer, particularly when we're so interwoven with so many other jurisdictions at the same time.
Thank you all. All right. Looks like we've everybody's had a chance to respond. We have a couple more questions that have come in. The next one being, what is the size of the deficit in dollars in the next 3 to 4 years?
So the current deficit that's facing us for next year is about $10 million. And your deficits going forward are all going to be contingent upon the type of solutions that you build in for the deficit that we're addressing for next year. So which is why I was referencing the importance of permanent structural changes versus just one-time solutions. I don't know if Debbie has the order of magnitude for years 24, 25, and 25, 26.
At this point in time, I think we're still crunching numbers. So we don't have all the budget wrapped up in a pretty bow yet. So I would have to say, no, we don't have that information. We are still working on getting it buttoned up so we can do the projections and see where we are in those areas.
I can add though, as a part of the budget process, that forecast will be available and we will be sharing those numbers in more detail. So I would encourage you to watch that. And again, I will also make some words of encouragement that while it's hard work and it will take a little bit of pain, as the mayor stated earlier, that the more structural permanent solutions we put in place, the better our situation will be in subsequent years so that we can get to that fiscal recovery that we're hoping for.
Thank you. The next question on here, what budget reductions have already been implemented to help?
Oh, that's a great question. So a couple of things that we've done as we're working to develop the budget process is look and make sure that we are keeping a baseline budget that's equal to our prior year adopted budget. And that actually caused some internal reductions going into a budget cycle where we came up with scenarios of I believe 5, 7, and 10% reductions. And so this is beyond let's just reduce travel, let's reduce food. We're already have done that. So now we're really looking at service consolidation, making sure that we're not having duplicative efforts with service delivery, maybe rolling up some of the work that we're doing and doing it less, programmatic hours, or choosing programs that maybe we won't offer for a shorter period of time. So we're really looking at things that actually involve people and service delivery. Many of those things that you're asking about are going to actually be coming out more into the budget that we're going to be presenting. But things that we've done, I guess great examples would be really cost related items like equipment and vehicles. We've delayed purchases. We've extended out replacements of equipment and vehicles. And it seems like nominal, but actually collectively, you're talking millions of dollars when you start doing things like that. So we've really been looking at our fleet utilization from that respect. Debbie, I don't know if you've got some other examples of what we've done prior kind of going into this, but those are just a few things that I thought of.
So yes, the city is looking internally in our organization to see where, like if we have duplicated services or things like that, we're really working with across the departments to make sure that we're looking across the organization and making sure we're most using the resources that we have most efficiently. And so that is a continuing ongoing work. And it just, if we solve this budget, it's not going to stop. That work needs to continue on an ongoing basis because organizations change and grow organically, and we need to make sure that we're in a position to continue to do that. So we need to solve our structural deficit so that on an ongoing basis, we can be more nimble and be able to pivot as those things come up that we need to address. Right now, we're very challenged to do that work because we're so limited in the dollars we have. But over the next couple of years, as we look to fix that and right size, what do we call it? Fiscal recovery. As we go through the fiscal recovery, I think we're going to position our city for long-term ability to provide service to the community in the manner that we would like to.
Thank you both. We have a few more questions coming in. The next one here is, in addition to the general fund, are there any other city funds that have budget challenges or shortfalls?
Yes, so I kind of briefly touched on a couple of those. One is our library fund, which has definitely been struggling for some time. And that also relies on external funding through multiple sources. And so that is not enough. And as I mentioned, the city also provides a subsidy, if you will, to help maintain services. So that is actually going to be a conversation. There is a property tax levy that will be up in 2025. And some formula allocation conversations that are going to happen over the next couple of years. And so that is a problematic fund. Another fund that is also going to be challenging is our street fund. We have a lot of limited revenue coming into that. Our gas tax is one of the main providers. And right now we are not shoring up enough revenue to invest in our roads. And so that will be a conversation with the council as well on the 25th of April.
Thank you. Now we have a couple of questions here about the workforce. They're related questions. First one, are workforce reductions being considered? Will these be full-time staff or primarily temporary positions? And I'll let you answer those and then
Sure.
go ahead.
So the budget, is still being put together, but I can tell you that workforce reductions are a distinct possibility, and it could be across the organization in terms of full-time, part-time, temporary, partial FTE reductions. All of those will be considered.
And the related question, why hasn't the city activated a hiring freeze?
Oh, a hiring freeze. Well, we actually have been in a soft hiring freeze. So one of the things, misnomers that people will say is, well, why don't you just freeze all positions and then call it a day? Well, if you do that, you may unintentionally disrupt a level of service that you've become accustomed to, and that is actually really important. So when positions open up, they're immediately not filled. They're looked at through a lens of, is this a core or essential service? Is this something that we can wait on? Is this something that we can consolidate? So that it goes through a filtering process, and then ultimately a decision is made whether to fill it or not. So I would say it's more of a soft hiring freeze, and we will continue to have that approach as we move forward in this process.
Okay, thank you. Looks like we have one more question here. And this one says, I am curious if the city, along with other local jurisdiction partners, are seeking a state approach for revisiting our state property tax laws or other tax revenue solutions, such as a sales tax.
Oh, well, I think the mayor may be the best person to answer this one. Mayor, did you want to take the?
Sorry, I was looking for the unmute button. I had shifted it to the side. Well, of course, this is a highly political question, so I'll take that on. Of course, like every jurisdiction would want us to address property tax reform. Unfortunately, the voters in the 90s have a state constitution in place that only allows us to raise taxes to a certain amount. And it was passed in Oregon when we had the height of timber and we were running a lot of money through timber industries. And then in the 90s, when we had a lot of that restriction shut down because of protected species, it made it much harder for cities and counties to have revenue because so much of that business tax had gone away. So we have worked with all kinds of cities. Just most recently, the Oregon League of Cities convened a conversation with city mayors and county commissioners to talk about possible property tax reform. However, it would have to go to the ballot and it would have to be passed as a statewide initiative. So unfortunately, no single city could do this alone. And I come from out of state. I don't want to say which state. Most people hate the one I'm from. And so I've long questioned the property or the sales tax approach. It's just the Oregon way. And again, it would require a state vote on that. And so it's not something we could do in partnership. And that's not going to help us in our immediate need right now, but it is in the long-term planning. I think many of us want us to go that way. Just unfortunately, it's not something we could do in this particular crisis we're in. So yes, I'm in. So if you contact some state lawmakers, I'm in to help it.
All right, great. All right, here we are. We have one more question here. What are we doing now to make sure this doesn't happen again in the future?
That's probably the $1 million question, right? And there's a number of things, I mean, that we can do to shore up and button up expenses. But as I think, you know, our finance director mentioned, we are a growing city and we do need to prepare for some of those continuing expenses. South Cooper Mountain's a great example. That's a little small mini city right there. And then of course we have the future growth of Cooper Mountain, and all of those are going to require additional resources. And how do we figure out how we support them and balance both the expenditures of those and the revenues of those. The city is also taking a really more greater stewardship approach with their reserves. Those decisions to use reserves have to require council authorization, so we don't take this lightly and we don't enter into drawing down our reserves. So that's one great strategy. I think the other is being very methodical about the investments that we make, both in technology and people. And so this is, like I said, we're going to be at this for a while. And I like to remind folks that I have a chance to talk to is that this is not a 100-yard dash. This is a marathon that we're running, and we're running it together. I'm really confident that we're going to be able to put in key changes over the next few years to address this. But we also have to make sure that we all agree on what that North Star is, and that is future fiscal sustainability.
Great. Thank you, Jenny. And I'm not seeing any more questions coming in at the moment. So I just want to make sure that for anyone attending tonight, if you think of questions after tonight's session, that they're in the chat. There's a link and for you to be able to go to the website and add questions after. And so with that, you know, I'm not seeing any more questions. I just want to, maybe I'll pass it back to Mayor Beatty for some closing remarks.
Awesome. Thank you, Carly. Thank you, City Manager and Finance team, for bringing your expertise into the conversation tonight. I want to thank our budget subcommittee members, Councillor Husson and Councillor Duggar, who have put in copious amounts of time over the last few months to understand where we're at. What I think our community can see from our presentation tonight, that we're in a fork in the road for the city. Our council goals and priorities are directly in line with this. We are a changing government. We are a changing community. Our priorities have shifted over the last 10 years, and we're seeking for ways to best serve our community through every avenue, through partnership, and making sure that we do the hard work now for a prosperous future. And we're going to continue to do this work together. Our next steps out of this is the city council is going to be able to weigh in based on feedback from the budget subcommittee and questions we're getting from our community information meetings that we're having now. And we're going to have to make some hard choices, and we're going to present those ideas to our budget committee in May. And then it's going to be what our future and our next year looks like. I just want you to know, community, that we have taken this role as elected officials very seriously. Our two main jobs is to manage the budget and to set policy. And we are steep in setting policy for our community. And now we're managing our budget the way we've never had to before. So if you have opinions tonight and you are taking this in, feel free to email all of us. All of our elected officials have our email addresses available on the city website. You have the link to ask questions to get further direction on tonight. And know that we're here to listen, and we're here to grow together. And what Beaverton looks like in the next few years is going to be directly related to this work that we do in the budget in the next few months.
Thank you so much, Mayor Beatty, and thank you to everybody for attending tonight's session. Appreciate you being here.